This is Monday, June 22nd, the year 2026. And tonight on Turner Classic Movies, they're showing The Misfits, a 1961 movie. Now, I grew up in a much different world of commercial entertainment. Movies would play on and off for years in theaters, drive-in theaters, and walk-in theaters. I talked to a guy who was in that business. I talked with him years ago, and he would have the film canisters in his trunk of his car, and he would, they had already made deals with the theaters ahead of the release of the movie. Then he would go, and the movie theaters had their contracts. If the movie was a bomb, they could get out of it if nobody was buying tickets or coming in to buy popcorn. If they didn't buy a ticket, they weren't going to come in and buy popcorn. So the theater wasn't making any money. So it was a different world. While the movie was playing anywhere, whatever movie it was, the guy would be driving around the region seeing what movies were doing well in what theaters. And then after the contract was up for the film canisters he would drive around to these other places that he had identified as potential players of the movie and say, hey, I've got it right here. I can make a deal with you. And they would do it often. He'd find one that did, so then they'd play somewhere else. So he'd drive around the region, and it might be a year and a half later, he comes back to that first theater. And they say, yeah, we made money on that. We'll sign up for another 6 weeks. We got an open spot here. So movies played on and off for years. Wasn't like today. I mean, there's no other market. The only other market was TV, and the main studios made those deals. And usually they let a movie play for quite a while because the audience would grow by word of mouth. Now, The Misfits was not a word of mouth movie. We went because my mother was a fan of almost all the stars that appeared in the movie. Now, I saw the movie possibly 1963, maybe 62. I don't think it was 61, though it could have been. Anyway, the stars were Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, Montgomery Clift, Thelma Ritter, Eli Wallach, Kevin McCarthy. It was directed by John Huston. It was written by Marilyn Monroe's Pulitzer Prize-winning husband, Arthur Miller. Now, as I said, I was a boy in the early 60s when we saw the movie. I was growing up, but I became a teenager in the 1960s. But I wasn't in the early 60s. I was interested in the non-human stars, the airplane, the dog, the horses, the pickup truck, the rope used as lariat for lassoing the horses, roping the horses. Here's part of the Wikipedia entry. These were big stars then. The entertainment era of that time. The story's not really interesting, I don't think, then or now. We went because only days after the movie wrapped, Clark Gable died. He did his own stunt in lassoing and capturing a horse. You can see it. That's in the movie. He had a heart attack from that, and he died days later. Then after the movie, I don't remember if the movie was out yet or not, but Marilyn Monroe died from a drug overdose. Montgomery Clift died only a few years later. My mom wanted to see the scene that killed Clark Gable, and she wanted to see Marilyn's last performance. She was a fan. It's not a bad film, and I used to recommend it, and no one I ever recommended it to liked it. It's on Turner Classic Movies tonight, but I'm not recommending it to you. The entertainment market is fragmented today. You probably watch something else streaming you'd like better. But back then, they were all big stars. Everyone knew who they were. Even somebody I didn't mention uh, in this article was Alex North, the film composer, music composer. He was good, a winner. I liked watching The Airplane, which is used to herd the wild horses. My mom wasn't interested in The Airplane, but she was interested in Marilyn and what Marilyn did. Hollywood stars had groupies, which was I always thought was kind of crazy. My first wife said she'd leave me for Omar Sharif, but she immediately said Omar Sharif doesn't want me. And my second wife said she'd leave me for Robert Redford. Fortunately for me, those guys are now dead. And I told both my wives if I caught them talking with Omar Sharif or Robert Redford at a party, I was going to start a fist fight. I had boxed and did karate. Now I'm an old man in my 70s with arthritis and heart disease, and I don't want a fist fight. But I had a pretty good punch as a young man. With any luck, my first sock to his jaw would have ended the matter. That's when stars were big. They probably had thugs around to keep guys like me away from them. I don't know of any stars now. You might have some people you think of as stars. My wife and I were talking about this today. There was somebody being interviewed on TV like she was a big star. We'd never heard of her or heard of anything she'd been in. But anyway, the movie The Misfits is a part of my childhood, like The Absent-Minded Professor. I plan to watch it, but it won't hold the same meaning for you as it does for me. It reminds me of good times of my childhood with my parents. We were just going out to movie. That was an absolutely routine thing to do as a treat. And I mentioned The Absent-Minded Professor. We saw that. That's the one I introduced the concept of flubber. So Fred McMurray's flying around in his old car. He flips a switch and the flubber goes to work. He just leaves the road and flies wherever he wants to go. After we left that movie, The Absent-Minded Professor, not The Misfits, I said, wouldn't it be neat, Dad, if we had flubber in this car? You just flip a switch. He says, we do have flubber in this car, and it does work if I just flip this switch. And he reached under the steering wheel, the drive column, like there was a switch down there. I said, really? He said, yeah. Yeah, we were coming up on some railroad tracks, and there was a rise in the road over the railroad tracks. He said, I'll flip the switch as we go over the tracks, we'll just keep going up in the sky. And my mom was holding my little sister, who was, I think she was less than 2 years old at the time. So she's a baby, toddler. And she says, no, Bob, don't, I don't like it. My dad's name, I'm Robert Jr., he was Robert Sr., she called him Bob. And don't, Bob, she was practically yelling. And Dad said, find something to hold on to. Now this is days before seatbelts. We did not have any seatbelts. My brother and I were in the back seat. I'm looking for something to grab a hold of. And I grabbed the window. And Dad says, don't grab the window, you'll fly out. So I try to stuff my hand between the seat cushions to hold on to something. And then Mom keeps yelling at Dad, so he says, okay, I won't. And he reaches his hand back from under the steering column. And Dad never told me otherwise, so I think I grew up my whole childhood believing we had flubber in the car. So I've been ruining my grandkids the same way, telling them all kinds of stories. Well, anyway, if you do watch The Misfits, I don't know, if you're not interested in movies, it won't probably grab you, but if you are interested in movies, it might grab you. There's some parts I appreciate now that, of course, I did not appreciate when I was a boy. But it does have some critics like it now. They didn't like it then. It did not do well at the box office when it was released.